Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the May 13th special meeting of Council. I'd first like to recognize that we're on the traditional territory of the Snuneymuxw First Nation. Our clerk tonight will be Ms. Sheila Gurry. The question period sign-up sheet is at either end of the gallery partition. If during the meeting any member of the gallery has a question regarding an agenda item, would you please write your name and the agenda item on the sheet? And at the start of question period, I'll call up those who've signed up to the podium to address Council. And the first item on the agenda is the introduction of late items. Ms. Gurry.
Thank you, Worship. We actually have a few late items this evening, and they're missing from your annotated, so I will cue you when they come up in the agenda as well. So the late item that is noted is the Task Force on Health and Housing. We're replacing attachment A with the updated version. There's also two bylaws that you have previously given three readings to, and they were supposed to be on your last agenda for adoption. So they have been handed out. They will be added to the website. And they are bylaw 7284, a bylaw to provide for the preparation of parcel tax roll, and bylaw 7285, a bylaw to impose a regional parks and trails parcel tax. So I will provide the motion for Councillor Brown to read out under the bylaw section. As well, under your delegations, delegation number A, Holden Southward, was unable to attend this evening, so he can be removed from your agenda. And one other item, I'm sorry, Your Worship, I just remembered this item too. It's the last late item, I apologize, is an item of correspondence, and we will add it as supplemental item, and Councillor Hemmons will bring it up under correspondence. It's a letter from Cedar Elementary School children, and she will speak to it when that item comes up as well. Thank you.
Very good, thank you. A motion for approval of the agenda as amended. Councillor Thorpe, seconded Councillor Brown. All those in favour? Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you very much. The minutes have been circulated of the regular meeting. Motion for adoption of the minutes is circulated. Councillor Thorpe, seconded Councillor Brown. All those in favour? Contrary? Motion carried. Thank you very much. Under the Mayor's report, there's three items I wish to mention tonight. Firstly, today was the beginning of the week-long 16th annual Health Among Us event got underway. It's an event today at Beban Park Artificial Turf Fields. It's an annual event, a partnership between the City of Nanaimo and the Nanaimo Ladysmith School District, aiming to introduce fundamental skills to children through non-competitive activities and play. Kids will participate in a number of activities, including tug-of-war, silly soccer, and real-life Angry Birds. It will engage 3,000 children between kindergarten and grade 4 over the course of the week. It runs from 9:45 to 12 p.m. daily, Monday to Friday. The event coordinators would like to thank the sponsors, Coca-Cola, Save On Foods, and the Nanaimo Ladysmith Public Schools, the RCMP, and Hornby Organics for the support of this event. If you wish to, a strategic link is Health Among Us supports the livability pillar by providing low-cost recreation opportunity for students in Nanaimo. As a partnership, we're delighted to see it happening in the city and encouraging good health amongst our young people. In addition, I would remind everyone to connect with Council during the upcoming E-Town Hall meeting. Residents are encouraged to participate on May 23rd. The event will be held from 7 to 9 p.m. Your residents are encouraged to submit questions on the following Council priorities: environmental responsibility, governance excellence, livability, and economic health. It can be viewed live on the City website, and questions can be submitted both online and in person as we gather here in the Shaw Auditorium. Public feedback was received on the draft strategic plan and incorporated into the key focus areas which fall under the 4 Council priorities. So that is an opportunity for folks to actually question their council quite directly without the benefit of the more formalistic proceedings like tonight, and I encourage everyone to do so. And finally, good news for those of you who like water. The city water parks are now open. The Parks and Recreation Department is pleased to announce the opening of the water parks, the 4 of them at Deverell Square Park, Departure Bay Park, Harewood Centennial Park, and Mansfield Park. They're open daily from 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. Every year, the city, I might add, prepares to ensure that the parks are safe by testing the pipes, cleaning the features, and making sure everything is in working order. So again, good news if you're young in Nanaimo or if you're still young at heart as well and wish to go down and participate with your children. That's it for my report. Save and accept, we have an item that I'd like Councillor Brown to speak to briefly.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I've been asked to sit on a panel for the BC Active Transportation Summit on June 17th and 18th. It would just be a couple-hour-long panel consisting of a couple other invited elected officials from local government and a couple MLAs. I would just be asking Council to authorize some very minor travel expenses to take the ferry over and a little bit of mileage. For you, those that are interested in the event, it essentially brings together politicians, engineers, planners, not-for-profits, to sort of get together, look at sort of best practices and the future of active transportation in BC.
Thank you very much. I think that's an excellent idea. Ms. Gurry, what would be the appropriate wording for such a motion?
If somebody would like to move that council authorize the travel expenses for Councillor Brown to attend this conference or this panel that he's been invited to sit on, and then it would be seconded and voted on.
Could we just say reasonable expenses? I don't want to be flying back and forth. I'm just teasing. Reasonable expenses moved by Councillor Bonner, seconded by Councillor Thorpe. Any discussion? All those in favour? Sorry, Councillor Bonner?
Thank you, Worship. I was wondering, you mentioned mileage. Are you not just going to take the walk-on and catch a bus?
Did they say miles?
Council, answer Councillor Bonner's question. As much as I would love to, I do want to attend Council that night, so.
Devotion to duty trumps mileage, Councillor Bonner, but good try. All those in favour? Contrary? Motion carried. Thank you very much. That's the Mayor's report. We now have presentations. The first one is Brian Green, the Manager, Terminal Development, British Columbia Ferry Services, Inc., who's going to provide a presentation regarding a new terminal development plan for the Gabriola Ferry Terminal. Good evening and welcome.
Good evening, Your Worship, members of Council. My name is Brian Green. I'm the Manager of Terminal Development with BC Ferries, and I'm here tonight to present on our Nanaimo Harbour Terminal Development Plan that was recently approved by BC Ferries. So just wanted to provide a bit of background on BC Ferries. Here's our new vision and mission. So we want to be trusted and valued, and our mission is to connect communities and customers to the people and places important in their lives. And also wanted to provide a bit of an overview of the structure of BC Ferries, because when I first joined BC Ferries almost 3 years ago, I wasn't aware that BC Ferries wasn't a current corporation anymore. So I just wanted to show this Venn diagram. Someone once said that all good presentations should have a Venn diagram. So here's my Venn diagram that shows the structure between BC Ferries. We're the service provider, and we have a BC Ferries Commissioner that is the regulator, which holds BC Ferries accountable, and then we have the provincial government. And the provincial government sets a 60-year contract with BC Ferries, setting out those service levels and fees and service routes, and then we have every 4 years an agreement which sets out what those service fees are. We also receive a federal subsidy of 29 million, and the province provides 155 million annually in service fees, but the remaining, essentially 80%, is from customers from the fare payer. Also, the province retains ownership of our ferry terminals when we have long-term leases with essentially British Columbia Finance Transportation Authority. Just in terms of numbers, we carried in 2017 21 million passengers, 8.3 million vehicles. We have 25 routes. We have 47 terminals across the province, 37 vessels, and just over 5,000 employees now working for the company. In terms of the other numbers on the slide there, probably the main one to focus on is that over the next 12 years, we've got around $3.9 billion worth of infrastructure spending. That incorporates both ferries and terminals, so around $1 billion of that 3.9 is to be spent on terminals and remainder on new vessels. Just also a couple of slides on some key facts about the Nanaimo Harbour Ferry Terminal, which I think you call the Gabriola Island Ferry Terminal, but for us it's the Nanaimo Harbour Terminal. It's just over 3 miles from Nanaimo Harbour to Descanso Bay and Gabriel Island. It's a 20-minute crossing. Currently that route is served by the Quinsam, which is a 63-car ferry, carries just over 400 passengers. But in 2022, the Quinsam will be retiring from this route and will be replaced by what are called island-class vessels. And these will be smaller vessels, but the big difference is that there will be 2 of these vessels two brand new vessels on this route going back and forth between Nanaimo Harbour. So essentially an increased service between Nanaimo Harbour and Gabriola Terminal post 2022. And there's just a rendering of what that new ferry will look like. So two of these ferries will be coming to the province in September this year on the Alert Bay and Tixider Island route, and we'll be shortly ordering 4 more of these vessels for this route and Campbell River route. Just a few facts about how many passengers and departures we have through this terminal. So just under 5,000 departures leave Nanaimo Harbour each year to Gabriel Island. We had in 2018 just over 185,000 vehicles, 101,000 foot passengers, with a total of 411,000 passengers, and we paid just over 26,000 in tax to the City of Nanaimo for the terminal, as we now pay tax to municipalities, given that we're not a Crown corporation anymore. So just moving on to the actual terminal development plan. So we had a 6-phase process for this TDP, for this terminal development plan, that involved pre-planning, a baseline report gap analysis phase, and then a key issues and opportunities phase where we heard from key stakeholders, from the public. So we worked quite closely with city staff from that point onwards. Then we developed some draft options. We took those draft options back to the public for feedback. That included some open houses in this building, as well as on Gabriola, as well as some online engagement, meeting with our Ferry Advisory Committee that we have for this route, which is made up of members of the public, as well as several meetings with city staff. And I'd like to thank city staff for the time and input that was involved in creating the TDP, and which led to a better, improved plan as a result. And then we produced a draft TDP, and then we took that draft TDP through our internal approval process, and that TDP was then approved by our executive in March of this year. So just showing you what we currently lease. The area in red on the screen is what we lease from BCTFA, which includes a water lot and a upland portion. And then I'm going to also refer to the land to the south, which is known as the Bow Tie property, which is currently owned by the Port Authority. And that's been an essential component of this TDP, is to seek to try and expand the terminal into that property known as the Bow Tie lands. So taking from our existing plan, we identified a number of key issues. We know that there's ferry traffic backing onto Port Drive, a lack of pre-ticket space, a lack of a formal pick-up drop-off area, limited amenities and facilities, also staff facilities that are reaching the end of their service life, and a holding area that's insufficient for the number of vehicles that we're seeing on this route. We also have a trestle that is reaching the end of its life. The marine infrastructure there, that trestle, that wooden trestle, is essentially reaching the end of its life and needs to be replaced. So this was a perfect opportunity to create a plan for the future of this terminal. However, we also have some new facilities. So we have a waiting room, washroom building that was built in 2012, and therefore, in the interest of trying to ensure fair affordability, we didn't want to essentially demolish or replace that waiting room building. So it's about also trying to ensure that we could incorporate into a new terminal development plan that existing waiting room building. So this sets out our long-term plan and vision for the terminal. So essentially, it shows the terminal expanding into that bow tie property to the south to get much more pre-ticket AEQ, which is automobile equivalent, so much more vehicle space pre-ticket. So trying to get more vehicles off Port Drive into a pre-ticket area. So we've got 4 holding lanes of pre-ticket traffic, 2 ticket booths to speed up ticketing, which will be needed as we move to 2 vessels and a much more faster throughput of vehicles. With ferries going every half hour, the need to process tickets and vehicles more quickly will be important. We also have a dedicated pick-up drop-off area on Port Drive, as well as some short-term parking and further pick-up drop-off within the terminal. And then also some further customer parking as well, but also trying to ensure that we have safe pedestrian routes from that pick-up drop-off areas to the waiting room and ultimately onto the vessel. Also, we've been working closely with the City of Nanaimo, particularly with Bill's team, on the waterfront walkway to see how feasible, how possible we could incorporate a waterfront walkway into our terminal. And within the plan, we've incorporated the three principal concepts that the city has produced for the terminal, for the waterfront walkway in this location. So ideally, we're trying to incorporate that waterfront walkway to go through the front of the terminals rather than having a detour around the terminal onto Port Drive that would happen in the interim, but we try to incorporate the three concepts that the city has developed into the plan itself, acknowledging that this is a high-level conceptual plan and there'll be need for further discussions as we get into prelim, detailed design, particularly working closely with our terminal operations staff to ensure that they are comfortable with any solution that is developed to ensure that we can load the ferries in an efficient manner as possible, particularly given that there'll be a more frequent schedule in the future. And that's just the third concept, just so we've incorporated those three concepts to allow further discussions at the prelim stage and to allow further costings and detailed design to be undertaken. So that's sort of almost concludes my presentation. Obviously, the plan has now been approved, but we'd obviously like to continue the conversation, work closely with staff as we begin prelim and detailed design. And so therefore, we'd obviously like the opportunity at a later stage in the process when we've got some prelim design to come back to council and present how those plans are going from a conceptual plan into actual prelim and detailed design. And that concludes my presentation. Happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thanks very much, Mr. Green. Councillor Brown?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Mr. Green. So just if I understand correctly, would the design, is it anticipated that there would essentially be no more overflow onto Front or One Port Drive?
So there may always be some overflow on Port Drive on those busy weekends. We've never done a plan for those 4 statutory holidays that occur during the year where we will have peak capacity. However, what we're trying to do is 95% of the time is trying to accommodate much more pre-ticket traffic within our terminal, because at the moment we only have about 4 or 5 pre-ticket vehicles until traffic starts to queue up onto Port Drive. So the intent is to, and we work closely with the city staff, with the previous transportation planning engineer and with Jamie Rose, the current transportation plan manager, to come up with a number that we should be comfortable with in terms of accommodating. So we've tried to accommodate 24 pre-ticket vehicles in that pre-ticket area, which we think is sufficient for 95% of the time, but also a crucial component is we've got 2 ticket booths as well, so we can process traffic much more quickly. So you could almost say that we're doubling that 24 into 48 vehicles that essentially will be taken off Port Drive.
A follow-up, if I may, Your Worship. I'm just curious on the anticipated timeline for the build-out of the project.
So this is essentially a 25-year plan. However, we have 2 new vessels on this route that will hopefully be on this route in 2022. We know that the priority will therefore be the marine infrastructure, and 2 things with the marine infrastructure. First of all, because there'll be 2 vessels on this route, we also need a tie-up berth, and as you can see on this drawing, we're showing a lay-by tie-up berth at this location, and therefore that will be the priority, will be the marine infrastructure. We know that trestle is aging. Whilst it potentially will be able to accommodate the new island class, we'd like to essentially not have to life extend that a further time, and therefore the priority will be on the marine infrastructure. And therefore, depending on how much that costs once we go to prelim and costing of that prelim design. So we've done some high-level costings that are like a level D type of costing, but we need to do some prelim design, get that further costed, and then into detailed design. And depending on how much money is left from the budget, then that will dictate how much we can build upland. Ideally, we'd like to build it all in one go, but obviously construction costs are escalating on a year-by-year basis, and therefore our budgets are set a few years ago. And then how we get to spending that budget, there is left not as much in that pot, given that costs have been escalating, and we still have to use the same amount in our budget. So ideally, we'd like to see it all done at the same time. We are in discussions with the Port Authority, and we have been discussing heads of terms with the Port Authority on the lease arrangements for leasing the bow tie property. Those discussions are going well, and we're hoping to secure a lease on the bow tie in the near future. And then that will then, when we'll get into more prelim detailed design. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Bonner?
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to Mr. Green. In this particular photo rendering, you have 2 lanes of traffic coming off the ferry. How do you plan on, is it going to stay at 2 lanes when it hits the front street? And how are they going to depart from there? Are they going to be all turning left?
So in this concept, yeah, we're showing 2 lanes, and yeah, ideally one would turn left and one would turn right. Again, once we get into more prelim design, we would be working with your city transportation engineers to actually see if how feasible or whether that is possible. But that's our current layout, and that was through discussions with city staff that helped us to come up with this option of 2 lanes. And the reason for 2 lanes is to essentially trying to speed up the efficiency of vehicles unloading, particularly when the ferry will be on a half-hour schedule. There's a need to unload as efficiently and load as efficiently as possible. So trying to speed up that unloading can essentially save us a lot of on-time performance issues in terms of trying to ensure that we keep to the schedule as much as possible.
Thank you.
Seeing no further questioners, thank you very much, Mr. Green. Much appreciated tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
The next is KPMG to provide a presentation regarding the 2018 Summary of Audit Findings. Welcome. And if you could introduce yourself, please.
My name is Liette Bates-Emer. I am the audit partner from KPMG on the financial statement audit this year. I have a summary of our audit findings to go through here. Here we go. So in terms of the status of our audit, we are almost complete. The last sort of step in us signing our opinion will be having the discussion with council tonight, and then witnessing your approval of the financial statements, at which time we sign our opinion. The opinion as drafted is a clean opinion, set up in the new auditing standard template, which moves the opinion to the beginning of the report and expands on the responsibilities of management, those charged with governance, and the auditor. I note that we have received full cooperation from management throughout the course of our audit. Oops. The areas of focus in our audit involved one risk that was required to be identified in accordance with professional standards, which is the risk of management override. We have performed our procedures to address this risk, which involved journal entry testing, retrospective review of estimates, obtaining business rationale for any unusual transactions, and we're satisfied with our findings with regards to the risk of management override. We also note that we do take a closer look at areas of estimates in your financial statements. So the areas with critical accounting estimates in the city financial statements relate to compensated absences and termination benefits or employee future benefit obligations, collectability of accounts receivable, useful lives of tangible capital assets, contaminated sites, and provisions for contingencies. We're satisfied with the estimates that are in your financial statements for these items. We found one audit adjustment that was really only a change in the presentation of the financial statements, so a reclassification within a note related to the disclosure of what the city has invested in capital assets. We made minor recommendations on disclosures that were corrected. There were no adjustments that we found that were left uncorrected, so no other errors remaining to bring to your attention. Included in our findings is a copy of the letter that we have provided to management regarding any kind of internal control observations that we've identified. So in the prior year, we had several matters listed there which we considered were significant deficiencies in internal controls, and we report back on the follow-up on all of our recommendations on those items, as well as there was another recommendation from the prior year related to reserves, which we have also provided a follow-up on, and then one new recommendation, which is considered an other control deficiency around payroll processing that we provided recommendations on. So management has also given a response to our new finding.
Thank you very much. Questions from anyone? Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I just have one through you, if I may, to the auditors, and I think you've answered this, but just for the benefit of our listeners and myself, I'd like to be clear. Last year, you identified 6, I think, significant recommendations, which are shown to us in Appendix A, B, and C, and those related to our policies and our oversight. And I would just like assurance, hopefully, that you're satisfied that good progress has been made in addressing those recommendations.
Absolutely, yeah. So included in the letter is our findings on the issues in the current year, which you will see have mostly addressed the findings. There's a few policies that are sort of still under development. So we would hope to see that things like the travel policy and the new whistleblower policy are approved within the upcoming months. But other than that, yeah, I would say there's been good progress against all of our recommendations.
Good, thank you very much.
Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to our auditors. I have a question of them and then one of staff, if I may. On note 1, section J, number 3, my question is, and it relates to our GPC meeting today, in which we were given a financial value to the Buttertubs Marsh and other natural resources in our city and the cost to replace them or fix them. My question is, why do we not recognize natural resources, works of art, and cultural and historical assets as having any financial value?
So as you report under public sector accounting standards, public sector accounting standards don't allow you to record works of art, historical treasure on your financial statements. You are just to disclose if you have such assets and the nature of them. So you don't put a value on your statements for them.
And
That's the accounting standards.
and that includes natural resources as well, then?
There isn't actually a standard for recording natural resources.
Okay.
So, no guidance.
Thank you. And if I may to probably Mr. Rudolph, on Appendix A, page 3, which I think Councillor Thorpe referred to, is the city should review the respectful workplace and reporting serious misconduct policies to ensure the differentiation between the two policies is clear and that both policies include effective escalation mechanisms. And my only question is, where are we at in that process?
Your Worship, through Councillor Bonner. All the policies are under review. We have 2 draft policies, one of which actually is coming to Council and Finance Committee on Wednesday. The travel expense policy and also the whistleblower policy are the 2 key policies that we are bringing forward. We probably will be bundling those as a group of policies for Council's information and review. So I think we're on track to do that. We've had to get a legal opinion on one of those and so forth, but it's in track and should certainly, with the recommendation of the auditors, will be anticipated to be before Council and adopted hopefully within the next month.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything further from Council? Thank you very much. Appreciate your presentation. The next is item 8, delegations. Mr. Southward's off the list, so I would call on Holly Bright and the Crimson Coast Dance Society regarding funding and pilot projects. Good evening. Just a reminder, 5 minutes. At 4 minutes, the little light will come on, and at 5 I will tell you to finish, please. Thank you.
Awesome. I'm Holly Bright. I'm the founder and artistic director of Crimson Coast Dance, as you know, and I'm here to thank you for your ongoing commitment to our operating funding and our special projects. And in a way, to help you understand more deeply the value of what we do, I'd like to just take a moment and ask all of you to stand up and then join me into some breathing and some moving that I'll lead.
We can do that.
So just take a step to the right and inhale deeply, taking the arms up to the side. Slowly bring your side. Bring the legs back to the center and bend the knees, exhaling. Take your arms forward, hands together, and just smile, reaching the hands, or sliding the hands, one over the other, kind of like the flag on City Hall on a windy day. Reach your arms around. The next time your arms arrive at the right, drop your right arm down. Circle it in front of your face. Take it behind your head and reach your elbow to the right and your left arm up. Aiming like a bow and arrow, your heart to string, go whatever direction you want. And the left arm reaching away, aiming to make the best choices you can make to make this city great. Drop that left arm down and repeat on the other side. Circle it around the face, back behind the head. Reach that elbow up to the left and your other arm up opposite. Again, a bow and arrow, aiming to make choices that create a city that your family thrives in. Drop the hands down, bring them up together and circle them down the middle, up around the right, down the middle, up around the left. You can pick up your feet, up around the right, up around the left. This supports complex thinking, by the way. Inhale.
Thanks for the mayor.
And bring all of your wisdom into your body for the choices and decisions you'll make tonight. Feel the heels reaching deep into the earth, the head reaching to the sky, taking up the space that you were given between heaven and earth. Bringing all of your wisdom to your work. Thank you for that. Thank you. Have a seat. So these transformations, these little shifts and changes that happen, you can feel yourself laughing, you can feel your heart pounding, your body, your blood moving in your body. And this is the core essence of the value of the work that we bring. Whether you were watching, witnessing, or participating, you felt it. And you know that we bring some of the most incredibly honored dancers from across Canada, from the province, the island, Nanaimo. We're now bringing international artists. This is all because of the support that we get from the city of Nanaimo. You're our direct beneficiary, and your commitment to operating funding encourages other funders to stay on board with us. We are now able to add programs. We have a Multiculturalism Day festival, thanks to the city, that's taking place in June. And we also have a new program, which you can see some footage for, that our general manager, Bryony Dixon, has worked on with Nanaimo Community Living, creating dance for those who have physical and cognitive challenges so that it can be a part of their lives on a regular basis. And we also are working with Nanaimo Aboriginal Center and Snuneymuxw First Nation to create oh, really? Already?
1 minute.
Okay, to create a space that is safe and comfortable for Indigenous teens to explore creative expression, to become young leaders, and to explore teamwork as well as career options in the performing arts. So those are just two of the things that you support us with on this beautiful territory, where it's not lost on us that the people who were first here lost their right to dance. And in order to address that and to encourage that voice to come forward, we are also creating opportunities for Indigenous artists, whether they're families, independent contemporary artists, or traditional dance artists, to present their work, and in particular through our Infringing Dance Festival in July this year. So I invite you to come and participate with us. Thank you so much for working with us to stimulate dialogue, inspire creativity, and to hold a place for beauty in Nanaimo. Haitska. Merci. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I just want to advise any further delegations in future that we may not always participate with the same quality and enthusiasm, but given the unique role that Crimson Coast Dance plays in the community, we thank you for that opportunity. Do any of us have questions? Hearing none, thank you very, oh, sorry. It's, you have to press the button, Councillor Gusson. It's done, Councillor Gusson. It's on.
Through the chair, I just wanted to thank Ms. Bright. Thank you for getting us out of our chairs. Actually, that increased blood profusion was very helpful, so.
You're very welcome, and you were beautiful. It was a joy to watch. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have three separate presentations on buried historical grave markers. The first is Pat Squire. And again, whoever goes first, introduce yourself in 5 minutes, and I'll give you the 1 minute warning when you're 4 minutes in.
One point, Rachel Squire was not able to attend. She gave me a letter to give the time to either one of us to use if it was necessary.
I'm sorry, but you have to appear in person. If Ms. Squire wants to make any presentation to council at any time on this issue, she can certainly adhere to the rules, but otherwise, there are only presentations in person. Those are the rules, Mr. Squire.
I have the rules provided by the staff, and there's no rule like that in there.
Ms. Guri, am I correct in my understanding?
Yes, Your Worship, to appear as a delegation, you can't pass your time to somebody else. You can appear and have your 5 minutes, but you can't give your time to somebody else.
Thank you. So who wishes to proceed first?
Okay, I will. And I emailed you guys earlier.
If you would introduce yourself,
Oh, sorry.
please.
Louise Guilfoyle, and I'm OBC. All right. So yeah, I emailed you guys earlier, just kind of explaining that that this is Pat's plight. So, so introduction. So we're not here for ourselves, but for others who can't speak, who are deceased, about what's been going on at the graveyard on Bowen Road. So in the 1960s, there was. Okay, all right. In the 1960s, there was a federal grant to remove the headstones, some of the headstones at the cemetery. There's $500,000 that was given. It was kind of a make-work project, from what I understand. And so at that time, there was the grave markers were removed, and I guess it was to make it easier to mow the grass. Which kind of leads to the question is, why at the time didn't they just take out the grass? So Pat has been pursuing this for the past few years now. He gave a presentation to council in July 2016. Do you have the photos? And at that time, there was some media attraction that kind of happened. So these are some of the markers that Pat found that are kind of just tossed aside at the graveyard, sort of by the blackberry bushes and whatnot near the alley. The one here with the cross that's upside down there is a Workers of the World grave marker, and there is no historical context that has been, Pat's been able to find. So just as a side note. After that meeting, Public Works had claimed that they had permission to remove this back in the day, and there's not really an understanding how that permission was granted. Like nobody from the families, there was one family that came forward with the last name McKay after this in 2016 when this came about, who were really upset about their loved one's grave marker being tossed aside. It's one of these ones in here. So there was no option to participate in this decision. There were no records of this, despite the claim of Public Works saying that this is what had happened, that permission was given by the families. In 2016, there was a unanimous council vote to dig them up, but Public Works, what was it? So it took them 16 months before the first dig started. There were excuses that there was no money in the budget. They were checking the property line. They were worried about finding bodies, that there was some contravention within the Cemetery Act, which is kind of a contradiction when they're digging up these things and then tossing them aside, and that it wasn't important. It was never put in the budget either. So after 1.5 days of work, everything stopped. And that was in the fall of 2017. They said they were finished. Pat went out and hand dug some of the stones up in March 2018, and they were easily accessible at that time. In phase 2 of this, arranged by Richard Harding, who Pat found was very helpful from Parks, it was in 2018, July 31st, August 7th, and August 14th. There was an excavator. Okay, there was an excavator that they dug up some of the stuff, some of the grave markers as well. It was obvious from the first dig that they didn't know what they were dealing with. Example, waste of stones. Pat wound up staying all day, each day, just to see how things were going. And then in 2018 in November, there was another excavation as well. And then Pat also figured out that there in the public works yard, there was a whole bunch of other grave markers off in the corner. So, and you have the photo, there you go, there's a bunch of photos there. And I think that this is where the Labio site is, right? And so they have all been kind of shuffled since then as well to make way for the supportive housing. So that is my bit.
Thank you, Ms. Guilfoyle. Any questions? Mr. Squire, please.
So the actual dig take place, if you look at the map, in the cemetery property, area 1 is where this excavation is taking place, right behind the cemetery office. None of this property is actually part of the cemetery. That whole adjacent property a lot of people think is part of the cemetery is not. It is Craig Street right away, and the city owns 6 lots in there. There is actually very few people that even planning in that even knew that this was not part of the cemetery. These are monument bases. These are dug-out bases at the same site. Then in addition to that, all these ones with people's names on the one at the top, so like with mother names and stuff, family names was done. There was one in particular, little girl here. This little girl here, her name was Grace Berlin. She only lived for 1 month, not even a month. Born in 1949, and April died in May of the same year. And then this haste to get rid of stuff, this thing, I found this one myself by hand digging. Her name got lost to kind of history, and then somewhere in this century, well into this century, somebody put her name on a headstone, but her first name got lost. And it's only Erlene, and her parents lovingly put her name on this headstone. And in this haste to mow the lawn better, this one got dug up and thrown away. It should have been never moved because it was a flat one already. So she's kind of this example of how parts of the history of Nanaimo have been lost in this haste. Because in a blunt reality, this is a desecration of the cemetery. It's not done with violence, it's not done with anger, but it's premeditated and it's planned, and it was carried out and carried on for decades. Public work, I have to say, they do wonderful things for this city. Greatest function, everything, our waterworks and everything, but somehow in their whole process, in their paperwork, they lost sight of this. They have, they were part of the problem when it was first created. They continued the practice. They never thought to go back to a subsequent city council, because councils come and go, to go back to them and say, hey, do you want to carry on this policy? That never happened. It was, when I was working with it, was repeatedly say, this isn't important, we have other priorities to do. I was promised more excavating this spring. They told me it's not going to happen. I asked them to stop dumping on the site, and for 3 years they have dumped thousands of cubic meters of material, further degrading the site and compromising, trying to find any other materials. If they had a project somewhere else in the city, they wouldn't continue to dump. If they were doing a project, they would isolate that project and make sure it was done. But for some reason, in this case, that didn't happen. So let Public Works do what they do well, and they do lots very well, but there is something in their administration or something that they've missed in this project. in the respect these people were not shown a long time ago, and we need to address that thing. Put this in the hands of those that really care. And I've talked to people from the museum, from the archives, from the Nanaimo Historical Society, and from Heritage, and all these people are interested in working on it. You've got citizens in the community, and we always talk about citizens' participation. Here's a prime opportunity to give respect to these people. We owe it to them. There's a saying, if there's no respect for the dead, there's no respect for the living.
1 minute, Mr. Squire.
Yes, thank you. We broke faith with those buried there. These were people who created what Nanaimo is now. They worked hard, they raised their families and everything, and they had their dreams, and they were hoping for that respect, but somehow they got failed along the way. It's fallen on us to correct that wrong. And just as a short thing, if you want to take the time and you go down to the Shemana Cemetery, you'll see a complete reversal policy of down there. They have left it completely natural. It may look unkempt, but everything's there, the methods of how people were interred and how the living go and remember those people and what they placed there. We're not allowed to do that in the Nanaimo Cemetery. That is taken away from the living, a way of saying, we remember you. So I appreciate your time, and I hope there is an opportunity to allow this to move forward and let the citizens in Nanaimo be part of it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Squire. Any questions for the delegation? Thank you very much. Appreciate your time tonight. The next is a delegation from New Leaf Outreach. And again, good evening. If you could introduce yourself,
Hi,
5 minutes.
I'm Sarah Lovegrove.
Thank you. And then at 1 minute, I will give you fair warning.
I'm Safa Habibi.
Good evening, Mayor Krogh, esteemed council members. Thank you for this opportunity to speak with you about New Leaf Outreach. My name is Sarah Lovegrove. I'm a former ER nurse from both NRGH and CDH in Duncan. Since November, I have had the honor and privilege to assist in building the foundation of this organization. I've stepped away from my career as a nurse and after only 3 short years of practice because I was diagnosed with PTSD, which came as a result of both the physical and emotional trauma that most believe come with the job. In search of alternative ways to heal for both myself and the world around me, I discovered New Leaf Outreach. Inspired by the founders of this group, one of whom is with me here today, I have since shifted my life and career focus in an effort to progress the work being done by this group and the peers who run it. Incorporated as a not-for-profit group in November, New Leaf Outreach is a drug user advocacy group made of compassionate members of our community from all walks of life that have come together to do this important work because each and every one of us have experienced tremendous trauma and loss as a result of the overdose crisis. We have been witness to many intersecting systems of marginalization and oppression that has led to this overdose epidemic, but simply put, most of our members have nearly lost count of the number of families and friends that they have lost, and we cannot stand to lose anyone else. Here's a list. We have come together to achieve one common goal, ending the overdose crisis in whatever way we can and when whatever means necessary. Here's a list of our current programs and services that I will review more thoroughly in the coming moments. Given the time constraint, I'm not going to go through any of their future projects. The Peer Outreach Program, funded by the Nanaimo Community Action Team, organizes the distribution of harm reduction supplies and the collaborative cleanup of discarded supplies within the community. Since the program started in February of this year, our team has collected and removed over 1,100 used syringes from the streets of Nanaimo. On April 16th, we had the opportunity to collaborate further with the Community Action Team to organize a day of action on the overdose crisis to call attention to the 3-year anniversary of the Declaration of Public Health Emergency. It is our goal to facilitate many more meaningful dialogues and community-based events in Nanaimo, progressing our conversation about the overdose crisis to one of actions and solutions. The Peer Overdose Witness Response Project, accepted into Phase 1 by Health Canada, utilizes a community-based participatory action research methodology to empower and compensate existing peer networks to conduct meaningful research within their community. The data obtained by this project pertains to previously unreported overdose reversals by peers in the community. These are the overdoses not being reported to police or emergency services and are not being counted in municipal, provincial, and national statistics. Since December, we have collected data on 65 previously unreported overdoses. Thanks to the generosity of private donors and a grant from the BC CDC, New Leaf Outreach has been operating our own pop-up supervised consumption site 18 hours a week on Wednesdays and Saturdays offering paid employment opportunities for over 30 peers. Within a single shift, our peers have seen greater than 180 patrons accessing the service, and just weeks ago, I personally witnessed more than 80 people, I think it went out, 80 people utilize our tent in a 5-hour period. The existing OPS on Wesley Street is not enough. People who use drugs do so not only by intravenous injection, but through inhalation and smoking as well. There is no space at the existing OPS to accommodate for these methods of administration. Meanwhile, people who consume drugs in this manner are at equal risk of fatal overdose due to tainted supply of all drugs. Having spent time at this tent, it is beyond clear that people who use drugs prefer to do so among the safety of their peers, so why can't we accommodate that? I'm just going to skip over that one. Despite the emergent nature of this work, we continue to face barrier after barrier to provide this service to our community. And although we have demonstrated our ability to quite literally shovel our way out of any situation, the city, RCMP, and most recently School District 68 continue to prevent us from operating these services. With the summer months coming, our population of people will undoubtedly increase, and the number of transient or street-entrenched people will be growing exponentially. It is not our goal to create more problems in Nanaimo. We want solutions. We want to work collaboratively and support the community as we address this increased demand for services.
1 minute.
We have prioritized one call to action that we believe demands immediate attention. We ask the Mayor Koch and the Nanaimo City Councilors come together today with us, with mothers, children, family, and friends who grieve in our community, to grant us a safe space to operate this essential life-saving service. Without it, people in Nanaimo will continue to die of fatal overdose. It is not a matter of if, but when. This is something that keeps the people of this group awake at night, and to be perfectly frank, if the council dismisses our request tonight, the message you're sending to the community of Nanaimo is that the political politics of even appearing to support people who use drugs is more important than actually saving lives. Thank you very much for the City Council's time and consideration today. We now welcome any questions and urge the council and the public to contact us anytime for more information.
Thank you very much.
Man, right. Sorry.
Please.
Sorry for speaking so quickly.
Councillor Armstrong?
Thank you. Have you made an application under section 56.1 to get a license?
To get a license?
Yeah, so you can have your site.
I wasn't aware that there was such an application.
Yes, there is section 56.1 or the CDSA, Controlled Drug and Substances Act.
Where do we get that application?
Just go online and you can make your application. It goes to Health Canada, and then they do a bunch of stuff, and there you go. And then it's done legally.
Okay, and then so would that would give us an exemption on existing...
Pardon?
Sorry, but the delegation can be asked questions, but not from the audience, please.
It's a permit that allows you to operate a safe injection site.
And that would allow us to do that outside of what are the city bylaws currently right now that exist?
Well, you'd have to go through the proper bylaws to do that. Like, you'd have to make application first to get your license, and if you get your license from Health Canada, then you would come and follow through with the city bylaw processes.
Okay.
I mean, I'll defer that to staff after, your worship.
Thank you.
Sure, thank you.
Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you for your presentation. A couple of questions, your statistics. Do you know how many people you've served since you've opened?
Who we served? Well, since we started, the Pure Run OPS has been operating in Nanaimo for over 2 years. Since we've started, we average 100 to 200 people per shift. So since November, twice a week, I mean, the numbers on that, I would say in the 2,000 plus range.
Okay. And do you know how many administrations of naloxone you've given?
We've had to reverse 5 overdoses.
5, okay. And what is your relationship with Island Health?
We're currently developing a relationship with Island Health. We actually have a letter of support from Dr. Paul Hasselbeck and Jenny, I want to say Rogers, but it's Peters, sorry, it's Jenny Peters, who's the harm reduction nurse at VHA, and we've had lots of different conversations about developing relationships and potentially an OPS outside of the hospital. So we're really trying to develop a relationship closely with VHA.
And we also have elected members of our board that are also working with Island Health.
Great, thank you.
Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to the delegation. One of the challenges that we hear over and over again are the proliferation of used needles throughout the city, and it's not just the downtown, it's all over. So it was interesting when three of us were up visiting a supportive housing development in Port Alberni, and one of the pieces of information we received was that they had the problem up there as well, but what they did was they set up a draw so that when somebody returned a needle, they got to fill out their name to go in a draw for, he said it was a hamburger at McDonald's. I don't know why anybody would do that, but anyway, that's. But it really apparently increased the volume of used needles that they got, and I wonder if any consideration of that type of thing is being thought of.
Yeah, well, we have a program similar to that too, and we encourage people to come and use our services so that used needles can be discarded of. And then also, like noted in the presentation, we have a team that collects needles and goes around to local businesses to find out where high traffic areas are where people are discarding used syringes, and we have our team go into those areas and collect used syringes. But we encourage people who use our services to bring them back, or we provide them with safe disposal containers so that they can put them in there and then submit them to a place that would dispose of them properly.
Councillor Hammonds.
Thank you. 200 unique visits per shift, like 200 people?
Yes.
Okay. And what are some of the things you're hearing from those folks that you're supporting?
Well, some of the difficulties, and why people access Pure Run services is that a lot of people have trauma related to institutional support. There's a lot of people, like we have explained, that smoke drugs or consume drugs and other methods that aren't available at the OPS that is sanctioned. So because those people are susceptible to fatal overdose, they opt to use our services over what's provided by the health authority, because they have better access through us to utilize substances in the manner that they choose.
Thank you.
Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you, Your Worship, to your delegation. I was reading in your article in the Georgia Straight that you offer free cannabis and other stuff to users. Is that correct?
That's done privately through me, but yes, I do offer holistic treatment models. The reason why we use cannabis is because different cannabinoid medications outside of smoking cannabis, such as CBD oil, provide pain relief and can help prevent symptoms of withdrawal that would encourage or opt somebody to use substances. So by relieving nausea, pain, restlessness, and symptoms like that, cannabis provides as a safe and effective harm reduction tool, and also as a method in helping people taper from opioid substitutions like methadone and Suboxone.
I can just add to developing cannabis programs and a holistic program is something that's in our future, and we just didn't have an opportunity to sort of go over that, like our full scope of what we want to do in the future. But with the legalization of cannabis, it's something that Newly Fair is pursuing in the future.
Thank you.
Councillor Hammonds, I hit it a bit fast, so you're going to have to turn yourself on.
Thank you. This is my last one. The stats you're collecting, are you able to distinguish between those who are living rough, those are homeless, those are housed? And the reason I ask that is the coroner's service identifies that it's often actually not the street and trench that are dying from overdoses. It's people who use alone, often in their own homes. So what's the ratio of what is the population you're serving? Are you serving mainly street and trenched? Are you serving those folks who typically we wouldn't think of as drug users and who are using alone and overdosing?
That's a really great question, actually. It's interesting because at the pop-up, we see all kinds of people come and access our services. I've had people come in on a shift that are clearly not street entrenched or clearly not homeless, that come in because they don't want to go to AVI or they don't want to go to the OPS to either get harm reduction supplies or naloxone kits. So we're able to serve people in that sense. And then also through our social media platforms, I've had lots of private contact with people asking for information, asking how to use naloxone, asking about services. And one of the goals and programs that we aim to provide eventually is basically an on-call service where if somebody is going to be using drugs, they can call a phone number basically and have two members of the organization go there and help supervise them and make sure that they're okay. This is something that's been done in other cities in the United States and in Canada, and it's been seen as very effective. And we're also encouraging more education campaigning, especially to people in the trades, different corporations and stuff like that have construction workers. I worked in the oil and gas industry for about 12 years out of a 16-year addiction. And nothing like that ever existed when I always used alone, and somehow I managed to survive my addiction. And so through my experiences and what I've learned in my own recovery, that's part of how I was inspired to help become a part of this project and help create change.
Thank you.
Councillor Brown.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for the presentation. It was delivered very quickly, so I'm just curious about what the exact ask of council was, and how does that fit into the obligations around the regulatory regime that even if this council was supportive of such initiative, our hands would be tied as well.
Well, something that I would like to note is that, we've had a very direct answer on what we're not allowed to do and where we're not allowed to operate. So given the fact that we're in the midst of a national overdose crisis and we are people with lived and living experience helping people in the community reduce their risk of fatal overdose, we would just be asking simply for a place where we can operate our services, perhaps 2 days a week, maybe more once you guys see how effective it is, and basically just a zone where we could either develop or install like a CCAN or some type of a unit that could be locked up and secured with ventilation, everything that we need, first aid supplies, harm reduction supplies, and just basically have one area where people know where to go every week. And that's kind of what we're looking for. And with the idea of the application, that's something that we're definitely going to look into. But basically we're looking for a place to operate because right now we're on this migratory route, constantly juggling locations, and what happens is people get used to coming to a certain spot and then they go there looking for what they need, and then they're not able to obtain it, and then the chances of that person using a loan or spreading communicable disease is increased significantly.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time tonight. I do have a question for Mr. Lindsay, however. Mr. Lindsay, what has the city done so far apart from a letter respecting the liability issues surrounding a pop-up site on city property? If perhaps you can explain it, because I am concerned that the audience listening tonight might not understand entirely the city's position.
Your Worship, with respect to this specific operator, you're correct. The only action the city's taken is a letter clarifying that use of our lands, whether it's park or city hall lands, has not been authorized. But on the broader issue of OPS and SCS, which I think Councillor Armstrong was referring to, the supervised consumption service, the federal exemption, the city allowed for the use of our property on Wesley Street for the establishment of the OPS under the provincial health order. So we were supportive of that establishment. Not aware of any further intent by Island Health to establish additional OPS at this time, but they certainly have that ability under the emergency order. And also anyone, as I think Councillor Armstrong was attempting to point out, can come forward and apply for rezoning for SCS, and then apply to the federal government for an exemption.
Thank you. Councillor Hemmons has one more question.
Thank you for indulging me for the delegation. So one of the distinctions that I think it's important for people to understand is that the OPS, you can inject drugs supervised and have supports around, but there is no place for inhaling. So what are you seeing through New Leaf? Like, what is the mode, the method of intake that you're seeing the majority of your clients using?
Smoking drugs is a pretty common method for consumption amongst people who use drugs. Not everybody, the people who are at risk are just people who use drugs in general. I've seen people overdose after taking one inhalation of a substance and drop, within a few seconds of exhaling. That is the reality of the potency of the substances that are out there. And then also when people have a safe place to look at what they're doing and see what they're doing, they're not in a dark alley, they're more able to accurately measure their dosage, which would further reduce the risk of them consuming more than what they should.
And we are seeing a good mixture of IV drug users and inhalation drug users opting to use our site versus the OPS when we are fully functional. They prefer the peer-based model and using drugs safely with peers.
And another thing too that I would like to ask or talk about is that other communities and other cities have modified their bylaws to accommodate peer-run OPSs. In Vancouver, there's peer-run OPSs that operate. That bylaws have been changed so that they can function without any harassment from the RCMP. So that's one question that we had for City Council, is that, you know, other jurisdictions and other cities in the province of BC have the ability to move through those bylaws and accommodate peer-run drug user groups, then, you know, what do we need to do in order for Nanaimo to follow suit and do the same?
Thank you for your indulgence.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time tonight.
Thank you very much.
Item 9, no consent items, Ms. Guri. We have under reports the 2018 annual financial statements. Ms. Mercer, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Under the community charter, it states that by May 15th of each year, a municipality must submit to the Inspector of Municipalities its audited financial statements for the preceding year. So in accordance with that, we are here tonight to present you with the 2018 financial statements for you to approve. And as stated in the KPMG presentation, they have completed their audit work and are prepared to issue an unqualified opinion that the statements fairly represent the financial position of the city at December 31st, 2018. Once council has approved them, of course. Just some highlights of the financial statements. I won't go through everything, but just high level. We have $18 million in unallocated surpluses, and under the new reserve policy that we presented a month or two ago, these monies would go into the new financial stability reserves. We have $159.9 million in reserves, and this is general statutory reserves and DCCs. We had $46.1 million in outstanding debt, which represents about $477 in debt per capita. And we had a net increase of $3.8 million over 2017. And this was due to the fact that we borrowed $4.2 million to fund the remaining automated garbage purchases, as well as $3.2 million for the construction of fire station number 1. And we had $702 million in net book value of our tangible capital assets. And this value will differ from our 20-year asset management plan that probably none of you remembered, but I just wanted to point out that in our financial statements, we don't account for every single asset. We have a capital asset policy that dictates what is capital and what goes into operating, whereas our asset management plan takes into account everything. And also another difference is these assets on the financial statements are depreciated, and the numbers in the 20-year asset management plan are not. So that's kind of a high-level breakdown of the financial statements. And so we're just here for your approval of them.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to move that council approve the 2018 annual financial statements for the city of Nanaimo.
Seconded. Councillor Brown. Everyone's had a chance to review. Any questions? Any discussion? Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Your Worship. Again, it's not a question. I asked those earlier. It's a thank you to staff for doing a phenomenal job on getting our finances in order and getting this audit on time. And I understand that the staff has been working under not as many people in there as you would like, and therefore you're working overtime and 6 days a week, and I would like to personally thank you for doing that. Thank you.
Very good. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Contrary? Motion carried. Thank you very much. The next is the Task Force on Health and Housing, to be introduced by Mr. Lindsay. Please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm going to ask Ms. Bopal-Singh to briefly introduce the report. The report's been authored by her team, and it is her team that will be supporting the work of the task force should council go ahead. So I think it's important that you hear from Ms. Bopal-Singh this evening.
Good evening, Council. So before you have a report, with the purpose of which is to request that Council approve the creation of a task force on health and housing. The background to this, as you may recall from the Committee of the Whole meeting on February 11th, where we presented on a range of social issues that the City of Nanaimo is involved in, gave you some background on the Nanaimo Homelessness Coalition that has been doing excellent work since it was founded back in 2001 as the Nanaimo Working Group on Homelessness, and then more recently with its current name in 2015. That group has been working on advancing the city's response to homelessness, and in 2018, Council endorsed the action plan to end homelessness. In the time that the coalition has formed, Nanaimo has seen an increased rise in complexities that lead to homelessness, ranging from mental health, substance use disorders, and also affordable housing. So a range of complex issues, and that's the reason why we are proposing a task force that is not titled homelessness, but is titled health and housing. The rationale for proposing a task force is looking at the experience of other municipalities that have faced similar challenges and who have managed to move forward the dial on some of their complex issues by looking for municipal leadership over a short period of time. We're proposing a one-year initial term with a council-led and council-chaired task force that would take some of the recommendations of the coalition, maintain a good relationship with the coalition, and move forward the dial on our affordable housing strategy as well as the homelessness action plan. The proposal is that this would also include leadership, senior leadership from Nanaimo, Island Health, VHA, the RCMP, key members of the coalition that would be appointed by council, and keeping the group small enough that it could be nimble to respond to some of the challenges we're currently facing and future challenges. So with that, what we're proposing is funding this out of the either the Housing Legacy, Council's Committee Fund, and or potentially Council's Contingency Fund for a small amount of around $2,500. And that also would include support from the social planning staff. So with that, we would like to see where you land with looking at the task force. Thank you.
Before I go to Councillor Brown, he may be suggesting it himself in any event, but I'm going to suggest that we, given the enthusiasm, I suspect, for the possibility of being appointed to this by council, that we perhaps deal with items 1 and 2, the approval of the creation, vote on that, and then approval of the task force. We can perhaps deal with those 1 and 2 at the same time. Ms. Curry, acceptable?
That would work, Your Worship.
All right. I will now go to Councillor Brown.
I will move 1 and 2, Your Worship.
Seconder, Councillor Hemmons. Any discussion? Sorry, Councillor Armstrong. Councillor Brown was ahead of you.
I pushed it right away.
You may now speak to it, though, if you wish.
I have an issue with staff capacity around this. Do we have the capacity for it? I also want to know if the wages and overtime are included in your $2,500 budget.
Your Worship, the second question first, maybe that no, it does not include obviously staff wages. These are projects I would note that staff I think are already working on and have time committed to, but we would definitely be allocating staff resources to this file. And in terms of staff capacity, yes, I would say that this work is going to impact our ability to move forward on some of our major projects in a time frame that we hope to, including the official community plan review that we would have hoped to have started earlier this year. But the reality is this is a significant issue in the community, and we think one that deserves staff's attention.
Thank you. Councillor Hemmons. Sorry. Just a little too heavy on the finger tonight. Councillor Hemmons.
A question about the scope of this committee. You noted that the affordable housing implementation or oversight of the affordable housing strategy will fall under this task force, pardon me, not a committee. That is a really monster plan that extends far beyond the length of a task force. So will this task force be responsible for being a part of a group that does this? I'm a little worried that the scope of this is really large.
Okay. The idea of the task force is to really prioritize and look at immediate things. So you wouldn't be responsible for the whole implementation of the affordable housing strategy, but to really look strategically at all the overlapping issues and provide some direction as to what the focus should be in the short term around things that are compatible with both the affordable housing strategy and the homelessness action plan, and then also the overlapping issues around mental health. And part of, I guess, the other piece is at the table will be a range of partners, including Island Health and others who have a really important role to play.
Councillor Gesselbrock.
Through the chair, I'm very excited about this task force. I think it's important that we formalize something that staff has already been playing a role in. We do have a large issue with homelessness and addictions and mental health, and the city has been playing a role in that, and it's time that we really take some leadership and advocate and facilitate and communicate with the different community groups, different levels of government, so that we can have a directed shared strategy towards how we as a community can really do what we can with this issue and support the senior levels of government in doing so as well. So thank you for putting this forward.
Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Worship. Through you to Ms. Bhopal Singh. So the task force, is there a mandated time frame by which considerations have to be dealt with? And if not, what was the other part I was going to ask? Is there a situation where, well, you can answer that first and the other will come back to me in a minute.
So what we're proposing is an initial 1 year for the council, for the task force to then reevaluate whether they need to continue. So the idea of the task force is not to be an ongoing committee of council that may last years, but to be a very strategic focus group that identifies what its key priorities are. That's yet to be determined, and then to direct staff, and then also look at the partners at the table for them to determine what their roles are to collaboratively try and resolve some of these challenges. One of the things we see is that there are many players who, like Island Health and others, who are part of the solution, and often the time we are in the role of facilitating. We definitely have a role when it comes to affordable housing and land uses and things like that, but some of the challenges around mental health, substance use, we work closely with our Island Health partners to move the dial on.
So the second part of my question was around goals, but I think you've pretty much answered that, so thank you.
Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you, through you, staff. I just have a concern about this because this has been going on since 2010. The same thing, city's been taking the lead, then we get rid of it, then we take it back, then we get rid of it. So I don't see the benefit of this, to be quite honest. I think that there's lots of community groups doing that. And it's just, to me, it's just another study. It's like we're not taking action. I've sat on at least 6 in the last 3 years, and nothing ever happened. So what's the difference between this one and what we as a city have been doing before when we were leading this? So that's my question. Thank you.
Am I on? Okay. Through the chair to Councillor Armstrong, the idea with this is that this would be council-led, which is quite different than other previous task force, and also including strategic leadership from the province, the feds, the RCMP in a smaller. Right now, the coalition is not a legal entity as such. It's not staffed or supported, and their meetings, while good, don't always lead to the action, and it's the action piece that we'd be looking for from this task force. And
council from 2010 to 2014. Okay. So it was done by council with support from all the groups that you had said at the time.
Okay.
So it was done, and then again, we're still at the same thing, same conversations. I personally believe until we bring the provincial authorities to the table, we're not going to be able to move on this. Thank you.
Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Worship. I'm very much in favor of this motion. This task force is going to be overseeing the implementation of the last council's recommendations and support for the coalition's action plan to end homelessness by 2023 and the Nanaimo affordable housing strategy. These were council motions, and I believe that this task force is very much needed to actually implement those motions. So I look forward to that. Thank you.
Mr. Rudolph.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Just wanted to comment on this because I seem to have had total immersion in the subject of homelessness for the last 6 years and participated in fact, led a task force in Abbotsford and saw the experience of that. And the similar comments were expressed at that time. It was, we have to remember that we just experienced an unprecedented scale of a tent city in 2018, and then the subsequent unprecedented challenges around the quick installation of housing project to remove that. And we've also had our workshop in February, and we had an expression of interest by the executive director of the United Way and the leadership around the coalition to help them take a gut check on their performance and the roles of all the key stakeholders. Offline, I've heard similar asks of participants on the coalition if something could be done to take a look at it to make it more effective or come up with a new model. So I think the city is not going to take over BC Housing, or it's not going to become a health provider or any of those things, but if one thing it is probably quite good at doing, and what is being proposed here, is a facilitation process, which the major key participants have been, I think, are willing to and anxious to participate in if they had a mechanism to do it. So I think that's my initial comments. There is a concern on the staffing side and the resourcing in that department that is proposing to support this. This has impacted the initial implementation of our OCP project because it's stacking up. So I would hope that maybe there needs to be some time delivery parameters put on this, and maybe there could be an add-on in terms of a recommendation that a report back to council, even if it's a preliminary one, be asked for by September or something like that, so that we, if there are budgetary implications or there's something of that nature, we don't want it to overlap too long, become too time-consuming. But so I think this could be a successful project. The people that are involved know what they're doing. They're good facilitators. They know enough around this that I think we could make progress on this, and it does show leadership in coming out of a difficult year. And certainly for me, it was a lot of work extra to work on this. So we know the issue continues to grow in our community, and you see different aspects of it presented at different times. So nobody's going to have, this isn't going to go away. We're looking for a way to at least take a gut check and facilitate a way forward that, and I know Island Health, and I know the members of the coalition and others have expressed the support for this type of thing. So we are facilitators, and it would be a leadership role that we were taking, and maybe there would be recommendations for all those agencies. And the other point I wanted to make was the suggested composition of this committee as a minimum is a decision-making at a decision-making level. So that's a key piece of this. If you notice the executive representation from the key stakeholder organizations that are on this, they're the ones that can affect change and have the access. So we're looking for senior executive representation from Island Health in particular, and some of the other organizations. And I think that will make it ultimately more successful. I think they will design a process which is inclusive. That's a criticism that could emerge on this if it's not inclusive, i.e. for peers or other agencies that are not identified as members of the committee. This group should identify a consultation engagement process for those to be participants. That's entirely doable, but you will have, if you have buy-in from senior executives from the major agencies, you will ultimately stand a chance for more success in implementing it and identifying what the city's role is moving forward. Again, not to own it, just to help facilitate a process. So from that perspective, and I think there was an additional, and I'm hoping not to be in advance of this, but I understand the business community some has not been identified in this, and there might be some merit in identifying a business community representative to participate on the panel.
Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you. Aside from my caution around scope, I want to express that I am fully behind this concept. The mayor and Mr. Rudolph and I had an opportunity to sit down with the CEO of Island Health a couple of months ago, and we heard from her that this model has worked in other communities in moving the dial. I really liked what my colleague, Councillor Gesselbrock, had to say about formalizing what staff is already doing. This seems like work that we're already doing. If we maybe get a bit more council buy-in. We put a bit more horsepower behind it. I like the creation of the housing and health. I understand the jurisdictional issues and how that might rub, but my sense of this is that we have a housing strategy and we have an action plan to end homelessness, but as we've all read, those are really big documents without real direction to our staff about what to prioritize. So I'm really excited about this, and I thank staff for bringing it forward.
Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you. Yes, I'm inclined to support this. I do have concerns about the scope. I certainly have concerns about the draw on staff time and resources at the expense of other projects. But the other comment I'd like to make is that I'm sure local organizations would welcome the city taking the lead on this. I understand that. But it seems to me that this task force wouldn't really be effective unless we were assured that we would have representation from the senior organizations that are listed. And when I see a senior executive from VHA, senior executive from BC Housing, senior executive from Ministry of Social Development and Poverty Reduction, senior executive from Service Canada, and so on, I would wonder what assurance we have that those organizations would be interested in being involved in our task force. And if they weren't, then I would see its effectiveness being greatly diminished.
Through the chair to Councillor Thorpe, we have actually made contact with about 80% of those on the list, including Nanaimo, one of their councillors who would have to get back to their chief and council, the RCMP, the officer in charge, BHA, their senior executive, who may be the same person, maybe the same councillor, Merrimack with BC Housing, and also one community entity. And there's one I didn't get a hold of, and that's Ministry of Social Development. So everybody so far is in principle, based on the outcome of this meeting, said that they are interested in participating, and we're quite, to be frank, positive about the idea. So I think, like ourselves, everybody is struggling to see how everything fits together and how they can coordinate. And through the chair, I'd like to respond to the concerns around staffing. One of the concepts with the idea of the task force is that the coalition, which typically meets once a month, that we would propose to the coalition that we meet maybe less frequently, freeing up staff time to participate in the task force, and also really ensuring that the role of the coalition is enhanced with their ability through the task force to see where they might fit on furthering some of the action items. So it's very much to not disband the coalition, but to enhance its role and the relationship it would have with this one-year task force.
Thank you. That helps my decision-making.
Councillor Armstrong again.
Thank you. I just want clarification around that. So when you were speaking with the RCMP, so that means that Superintendent Miller knows that he has to sit on it, because he's the only one that has the authority to do that. The same thing when you're talking health and all that. Like if it's senior executives, like for those groups, they're actually down in Victoria. So are they going to drive up here for that? Like was it made perfectly clear that you want people that have decision-making abilities to sit on that committee?
We asked for the most senior representative, particularly located in Nanaimo. So,
but that's different than having a senior representative versus somebody that has decision-making abilities at that table. So it's different, right?
Yes. However, we would hope that our contacts would make that decision. We can't dictate to them exactly who, but certainly when we spoke to the RCMP and Island Health and also BC Housing, they said that they would look at who they would assign, and I would speak to fairly senior people, and they were indicating that they were interested. So no guarantee till we put that formal ask to them, but we did at least check that they were supportive of this.
Inasmuch as I appreciate the reservations expressed by members of council and the concerns, and I'm certainly appreciative of them, I'm going to tell a very short little story, and it involves me being flattered last week to be asked to speak to a gathering of senior public servants who were in Winnipeg for a couple of days and then here in Nanaimo. And they asked me questions around the concept of leadership. And I said my basic definition of leadership was whenever you gathered a group of people together and they wanted to accomplish something or felt there was a problem or an issue, someone would step forward in that group, and that would be the leader. And it would probably be by consensus even, simply because they were willing to undertake something. I am looking around this council table and I see no other alternative than that this council take the leadership role in a situation that is plaguing our city. I hear constantly, whether I'm getting money out of the cash machine or talking to a cashier in the grocery store or talking to people in the streets or listening to delegations here, as we have for many months, the fear, frustration, and anger that exists in this community. There is fear around the issue of whether or not your children are going to be assaulted, your fear of whether your sons or your daughters are going to die of a drug overdose because they don't have access to facilities. We've heard an expression of that tonight. We hear anger from people who have had their homes broken into, their possessions stolen, who feel they're threatened and can't walk in their neighborhoods. One fellow complained to me that he has to get permission to use the washroom at the Tim Hortons. There's a multitude of aspects of homelessness and drug addiction and mental health issues that are frustrating those in our community. And worst of all, I hear anger from people. There are little rumors of vigilantism around the community. Not strong, but enough that it concerns me. Anger and frustration from taxpayers who believe that every level of government is spending money to address what they see as this problem without any coordinated effort or success or prospect of success or change. And so what are we to do as a city? We look to the provincial government, we remind everyone that they have the resources and the staffing and the jurisdiction to provide most of the solutions. We look to the federal government in the hopes that they will step in and recognize that this country has a national housing and affordability crisis. But in the meantime, as these monies continue to be spent and the fear and the anger and the frustration, the anger and the fear continues to exist, people are dying, people's lives are not improving in many cases, and that some of the solutions that have been implemented in ways that created anger and fear and frustration in neighborhoods, mixing people who are in active addiction, who don't have any present desire to move on or are not able to move on, mixing them with people who do want to get out of active addiction, people who want to try and make their lives better. So again, I ask the question simply, what alternative is there other than that this council take a leadership role? Will this task force succeed? I have no idea. I am certainly hopeful, however. You know, it's like Roosevelt in the dirty 30s. We're going to try something, and if it doesn't work, we'll try something else. But by God, we are going to take a leadership role in this community, because I am tired of seeing the sadness and the fear and hearing the anger and the frustration from the people in this community. And the worst case scenario is we will end up in a position where we'll be able to say, we tried, we couldn't fix it, we don't have the resources, whatever the case may be. But we cannot sit idly by any longer in the hopes that, to use the old cliches, that some white knight is going to come riding over the hill and rescue us, that the cavalry is coming, whatever horrible analogy from my youth you care to use. It is not going to happen. So tonight I am hopeful, and I sense around this council table a willingness to demonstrate the leadership that has been lacking. I heartily concur with the wise advice of our CEO tonight, who gave the kind of advice and commentary based on his experience in other communities that should help guide us in making this decision. So I, for one, will be supporting the motion tonight, and I hope to God something positive comes out of it. I am confident that the worst case scenario, we will demonstrate that we can't get the governments of various levels to do what their job is. That will be the worst case scenario. The best case scenario is that we will actually make the lives of our citizens better. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Contrary? Motion carried. Thank you very much. We now move to the question of the appointments. Councillor Brown.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Looking at the terms of reference, it says 1 to 2, so I would move that Councillor Hemmons and Councillor Bonner be appointed as representatives to the Task Force on Health and Housing, and I can speak to that amendment.
Seconded, Councillor Martman. Any discussion?
I'm willing to
speak to the motion.
Speak to that motion. The reason I've elected or put forward Councillor Hemmons and Councillor Bonner is based on their Councillor Hemmons' experience in community health and Councillor Bonner's experience with the type of agencies that are involved on the task force. I think it's important that we hit the ground running. For some of us, I personally would have an interest in it and that sort of thing, but I think need to be sort of cognizant of the skill set at the table and who would not have as steep as learning curve, and also provide staff with the flexibility they have in scheduling these meetings. If we are fortunate enough to get senior executives and those in decision-making roles with the respective organizations, I think we need to be flexible in accommodating their schedules to get as many at the table. So that is my logic behind those two particular individuals.
Well, I sense an enthusiasm for the two suggestions. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Contrary? Motion carries unanimously. I congratulate the two councillors who've prepared to step forward and work on this. This will be no doubt one of the most important things that we will hopefully accomplish as a council in the next few months. Bylaws, number 11, Ms. Gurry. We have bylaw 7284, and I gather Councillor Brown has a copy of the necessary motion. Councillor Brown?
Something like that, Your Worship. Thank you. I would move that the parcel tax roll preparation bylaw 2019 number 7284 be adopted.
Seconded, Councillor Thorpe. Any discussion? All those in favor? Contrary? Motion carries. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would move that the Regional Parks and Trail Parcel Tax Bylaw 2019 number 7285 be adopted.
Seconded, Councillor Thorpe. Any discussion? All those in favor? Contrary? Motion carries. We're now on to correspondence, and a very happy bit of correspondence, and the kind of correspondence that gives us hope for the future. Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you very much. A number of us on council, likely all of us, received letters from Cedar Elementary students, Mr. Osa's class, regarding the banning of single-use plastic water bottles in the city of Nanaimo. And as most of you know, I'm really interested in engagement and democracy and engaging young folks in particular in how we do governance. So I just want to read one letter that I received. This is from Landon M. And he writes, "Dear Aaron Hemmons, my class has been talking about the problems of plastic pollution. Our class wants to ban plastic water bottle sales in Nanaimo because plastic breaks down into tiny chunks and gets into our food that we eat. Fish and whales eat plastic. Many of the fish we eat have plastic in their bloodstreams. Most water bottles are not recycled and end up in the landfill or the ocean. 93% of plastics are not recycled. Plastic water bottles are a waste of oil, a non-renewable resource. The amount of oil used to make the plastic for water bottles in the US could fuel 1 million cars. Nanaimo's water quality is better than most store-bought water. We need to educate people on saving water for emergencies, create more public water fountains, and water should be free." And this just blew my mind. I loved it. And I want to commend Landon and Mr. Osa's entire class for engaging in these kinds of conversations. And, just a few short weeks ago, this council voted to declare a climate emergency. And it's youth like Landon that will be implementing, hopefully, the policies that we put in place to do that. So thank you to Mr. Osa's class. Thank you to Landon M. And a reminder that we actually have a survey going on right now until the end of May where people can give their opinions, both commercial and residential opinions, on the potential regulation or ban of single-use plastic bags. You can do that on the city website. So thank you.
Thank you very much. And a child shall lead them, isn't it correct, Councillor Bonner? I have to tell you, my screen's gone haywire again, so if you want to be recognized, you have to raise your hand. Councillor Bonner.
Thank you. and I also received letters from the same class, and I'd like to thank Paige and Lamb for their letters. Slightly different, same sort of topic, and I'll be responding to them the same way they did to me.
Councillor Martman.
And I would like to thank Cole Smith, who wrote to me, and a letter is on the way to him as well. So good on the class.
I think if this was the close of an organizational meeting, we'd say this is the good of the order. Thank you very much. No notices of motion, no other business. Question period items, none. Before we adjourn, I just want to express my thanks to Council for tonight for the vigorous debate around numerous issues and the contributions of everyone tonight. And a special thanks to Councillor Thorpe, who managed to get my screen up and running with no small amount of difficulty when I was trying to listen to a delegation. However, it has slipped off the radar again, but mercifully it's the end of the evening. So a motion for adjournment, Councillor.
I was just going to suggest that when we have these rather interesting conversations, if you spoke first, you can save us a lot of time.
Second. All those in favor? Motion carried. Thank you very much.